The Yellowstone supervolcano is about to erupt. Okay, so that was the clickbait title of this video. But is it true? Let's dive into the science behind supervolcanoes. What would happen if Yellowstone erupted and how likely it is to occur anytime soon? Yellowstone National Park in the northwest corner of the United States is famous for its geysers, hot springs, and wildlife. And because it's home to the world's largest active supervolcano, there is always discussion about whether or not the next eruption is imminent. So in this episode, we will talk about what makes Yellowstone a supervolcano, the history of eruptions at Yellowstone, how scientists monitor the volcano, and whether or not we are overdue for an eruption. Yellowstone Caldera, also known as the Yellowstone supervolcano, is located in the northwest corner of Wyoming and spans over 43 by 28 miles or 70 by 45 kilometers. In fact, much of Yellowstone National Park sits on top of this supervolcano. A caldera is a large volcanic crater that forms when a magma chamber gets emptied during an eruption. Because the magma chamber underlying Yellowstone has been repeatedly emptied over the past 2 million years, it has formed a large caldera. But why is Yellowstone considered a supervolcano? Well, it's because the magma chamber under Yellowstone is capable of producing extremely large eruptions. In fact, it's estimated that the magma chamber could produce an eruption that ejects over 2,400 cubic miles, or 10,000 cubic kilometers of material. For comparison, the largest recorded eruption in history is that of Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines in 1991. This eruption ejected approximately 2.4 cubic miles, or 1 cubic kilometer of material. So that means that a supervolcanic eruption is more than 1,000 times larger than even the largest eruption recorded in history. In addition to the size of the eruption, another factor that makes something a supervolcano is the Volcanic Explosivity Index, or VE. This index describes the relative violence of an eruption based on several criteria, including the height of the eruption column, the volume of material ejected, and the energy released. An eruption is considered supervolcanic if it has a VE of 8. Currently, the highest VE rating of any volcano is 7, which includes Mount Pinatubo again, and Novarupta in Alaska in 1912. So even though Yellowstone has had many large eruptions in its past, none have reached the VE 8 threshold. However, there have been 3 major eruptions in Yellowstone's past that were super eruptions with VEs between 7 and 8. The first of these occurred about 2.1 million years ago and ejected an estimated 2,800 cubic miles, or 1,200 cubic kilometers of material. The second largest super eruption at Yellowstone occurred about 1.3 million years ago and ejected an estimated 1,700 cubic miles, or 700 cubic kilometers of material. The most recent and largest super eruption at Yellowstone occurred 640,000 years ago and ejected an estimated 2,400 cubic miles, or 1,000 cubic kilometers of material. All 3 super eruptions had VEs of around 8. Now, let's look at the timeline of events that led up to these 3 super eruptions. Starting with the most recent one, 640,000 years ago. Prior to the super eruption, there was a period of volcanism building up the magma chamber. This created a dome-like structure called a lava dome. The pressure from the magma caused the top of the lava dome to bulge upwards, forming a caldera. As the magma chamber continued to fill, the caldera subsided. This cycle of magma buildup, uplift, and resubmergence happened several times before the super eruption. During the super eruption, a massive amount of magma was released, emptying the magma chamber and forming the Yellowstone caldera. After the super eruption, new layers of ash and debris covered the existing caldera. Over time, the magma chamber began to refill. Once again, new lava domes formed, and the cycle repeated itself. This cycle continued until the most recent super eruption, 640,000 years ago. Since then, the magma chamber has been slowly filling, leading up to the present day. So what would happen if the Yellowstone supervolcano erupted today? The impacts would be both local and global. Locally, the surrounding areas would experience the full force of the eruption. Pyroclastic flows, lahars and floods would cause massive destruction within the park and surrounding areas. Ash would blanket the entire western United States. Globally, the eruption would inject massive amounts of sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere. This would reflect sunlight back into space, causing global temperatures to drop by several degrees for months or even years. Global crop failures and famine would likely result. If Yellowstone were to erupt today, the impact would be devastating. However, it is important to note that such an eruption is extremely unlikely to occur anytime soon. Scientists carefully monitor Yellowstone to identify any signs of increased activity. Currently, there is no indication that an eruption is imminent. So is Yellowstone overdue for an eruption? Well, some people think so. They point to the fact that the last super eruption occurred 640,000 years ago and say that it's been overdue for thousands of years. However, others argue that there is no set time frame for when a super eruption must occur. They cite the 1.3 million year gap between the two largest eruptions as evidence that super eruptions can take thousands of years to occur. Ultimately, there is no consensus on whether or not Yellowstone is overdue for an eruption. Yellowstone National Park receives millions of visitors each year. They come to see the geysers, hot springs, and wildlife. Few realize that they are standing on top of a supervolcano. While the risk of an eruption is small, it's important to be aware of the potential danger. In the event of an eruption, the surrounding areas would be devastated. The rest of the country would also feel the effects. If Yellowstone were to erupt today, the impact would be significant. But thankfully, scientists are constantly monitoring the volcano, and there is no indication that an eruption is imminent. You might be wondering how scientists monitor Yellowstone. Well, there are several ways. One way is through seismic monitoring. By recording the strength and timing of earthquakes, scientists can get an idea of what's going on beneath the surface. Another way is through GPS monitoring. By tracking the movement of the ground, scientists can identify any changes in the shape of the caldera. These changes can indicate that magma is being added to the magma chamber. Finally, there is geochemical monitoring. By measuring the composition of gases and fluids in the area, scientists can identify any changes that may indicate magma is moving towards the surface. As we've seen, Yellowstone is a fascinating and potentially dangerous place. Thankfully, scientists are working hard to monitor the volcano and keep us safe. So while there is always the possibility of an eruption, the risk is very low. Alright, let's take a moment to address the comments that we get on all of our videos about Yellowstone erupting. Some people seem to want Yellowstone to erupt because they believe it would be exciting or beneficial. Others seem to fear an eruption because they believe it would be destructive. The truth is that an eruption would have both positive and negative consequences. It would certainly be exciting to see such a powerful natural phenomenon up close, but it would also be very dangerous. The surrounding areas would be devastated and the rest of the country would feel the effects. Ultimately, whether or not an eruption would be good or bad depends on where you stand. What do you think? Would you want to see Yellowstone erupt? Or would you rather be safe and let it sleep? Let us know in the comments below. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. We'll see you next time.